Hello, everyone.
Hi there, guys. This is Rita.
This is Amanda, and you're listening to I Don't Know Her, the podcast where we talk about women you've probably never heard of.
But you should have. And today...
And now you will.
You will.
So we have been getting some pretty nice messages from our listeners lately that have been really helpful. You know, one of them in particular, I don't know that she would want us to say her name, so I'll leave that out. But thank you, person who emailed us. We got a really nice email from someone who recently started listening and is not only that, like, not only telling us how much she's enjoying the show, but also has been like singing our praises all over Twitter and Instagram and everywhere in between. That's been really, really cool. She even gave us a review on Facebook. And just from her one plug on Twitter, we had like 10 new followers.
That's awesome. Like, honestly, we do truly appreciate that. The fact that someone's even, you know, that people are out there listening and that they are enjoying what we have to say and sharing it with other people is just, I'm over the moon about it.
Yeah. And caring enough to say, I care what you're doing and I want other people to know about it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And we had another, sorry, go ahead, Rita.
Well, I was going to say, we put so much work into this. And at times I'm kind of like, I really hope that, you know, I get a little self-conscious. I'm like, I don't want to sound stupid. I don't want to sound naive. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I shared that about myself. But then to hear other people say, oh my gosh, that really helped me, or I identify with that, or I relate to that, or yeah, I've struggled with that too. And that's nice to hear.
It really is. I was just going to say that we had another person reach out and said, you know, thank you for talking about being non-binary and some of the other stuff you guys have talked about, and that they have had a chronic pain condition, and that's something that I've dealt with as well. So it's been really enlightening to know that what we're talking about does matter. And it made me think about that episode just because I wanted everybody who was listening to know that, one, that was not planned. As Rita can attest, we were both a little surprised I was talking about that. And two, because I hadn't planned it, I kind of zeroed in on talking about one specific body part that makes me have some body dysphoria, which is my breasts. But I do want to make sure that I'm clear about, like, that's not the one thing that makes me feel that I don't identify as a woman or as a man. That, like, there's a lot of other things. And once we turned off the mics, Rita and I talked a lot about those things. Probably like a good hour after we got done recording.
I was not expecting it either. And I was wondering if Amanda was going to want to keep that in. And I was really proud that it stayed in.
You know, what's funny is I thought about telling Lucas to take it out, but I was like, then I'd have to tell him what I talked about before he listened to it, and I just wasn't ready to talk about it at all. And I was like, whatever, everyone will just hear it, and that'll be the end of it. I don't want to talk about it.
I do have to say, I did, after we recorded, I watched about 4 hours of YouTube videos of interviews with non-binary people and their experiences and like the loads of information that's out there from people themselves. And so I did a little researching.
I really appreciate that. See, that's really cool. I was actually on YouTube the other day, like, how to dress for, like, it was like, how do I find ways to minimize the way that, like, my chest is in certain clothing without binding, because binding will make other problems happen that I've already discussed that we don't need to go back into. So it's like, it's funny because I I didn't, it was a pretty recent revelation for me. It's been something I've sort of been talking with my wife about for like at least 8 months, I would say. But in terms of like, you know how before you can even talk about it with another person, you've already been thinking about it for a while, whatever that thing is you want to tell somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're trying to figure out the words.
Yeah. And also just like sort through your thoughts. Like, what are my thoughts about this? Mm-hmm. And it started to make a lot of things click into place that had just never really made sense to me, you know? And it's really helped me, I guess, move forward in my own life and thoughts and things like that. But I'll just say right now, I feel like I feel like one of those dreams where you show up to something really important absolutely naked.
Oh gosh. Mortified.
That's the way I feel all the time right now, because it's just it's enlightening, and yet at the same time I feel completely unprepared and have no idea what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you for helping me through this.
And thank you, listeners, for being on this journey with us. You know, we really do put ourselves out there. We've said a lot of stuff that's very personal. Mm-hmm. And thank you for being gentle with us.
I agree. We've really had great positive feedback, except for like an occasional dude here or there who'll be like, if you could just stop saying all the time, you'd sound smarter.
Fuck off.
A dude on the internet has an opinion.
Oh no. Everybody stop.
Everybody stop what they're doing and listen to this guy's a bad opinion.
Oh.
Well, you know, it is quarantine and there's not a lot going on.
True.
So are we ready to just hop into it?
I say let's jump into it.
All right, Rita, lay it on me. What do we have today?
All right. Have you ever heard of Sandra Aguebor?
No, I don't know her.
She is the first female mechanic in Nigeria and the founder of Lady Mechanic Initiative.
Wow. Well, no wonder I've never heard of her. She's from Nigeria.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm really ready. This is exciting.
All right. So Sandra was born in Benin City, Nigeria in the 1970s. Sandra's actual birth date is unknown. She doesn't know the date of her birth, which
She was born in the 70s?
Yes.
She's like 10 years older than us.
Yeah.
And doesn't know when she was born.
No.
That's wild.
She was raised in a family with modest means. Her mother and father were able to put her through school, which was not always the option for girls in Nigeria. Her father was a polygamist, and he divided his time between 7 wives.
7?
7 wives and 7 different families.
That is too many. I couldn't do that.
That's a lot. And so Sandra's mother was his second wife. Isn't that crazy?
I mean, 7 wives itself is, I realize that's probably a cultural thing but that's not for me. I couldn't do it. My very good friend, though, grew up in a polygamous family.
That's wild.
Yeah, she has some pretty wild stories.
Well, many young girls in Nigeria often do not take their education further, like into high school or into college. Mostly girls come from extreme poverty, and they have to start earning money at a very young age to help their families survive. At the age of 13, Sandra was really interested in mechanics. She found it fascinating. She kept this, though, to herself. Mechanics and engineering was something that was not socially acceptable for a girl to be interested in, and almost she might as well wanted to grow wings and fly if she wanted to make this into a career.
Yeah.
Sandra claims that she had a dream one night and that she was shown that she was going to be a mechanic and she was going to do amazing things with it. So she became inspired enough that she decided to tell her parents about the career path that she wanted to take. Her parents, right off the bat, were of just like unsupportive. Like, this is a hard no. You're not going to do this. Sandra describes that when she told her parents, for lack of better words, she said they were horror struck. Like, they were just disgusted with the fact that she would want to do this.
Is that, I guess there must be some kind of cultural expectation for girls. I mean, I can make some assumptions, but I don't know like the actual facts of Nigerian culture in terms of that. I've had one Nigerian friend, and I do know a little bit, but it's pretty lacking. My knowledge is pretty lacking in that area. Did it say anything about like what was traditionally expected of girls in the 70s in Nigeria?
It was more of like the traditional roles. You know, you're going to get a job as a housekeeper. You are going to get a job taking care of someone's children. You're going to get a job washing clothes. You're not going to go and be a mechanic. You're not going to go be an engineer. You're not going to go work in an office.
And you said she'd wanted to be a mechanic, like basically since childhood.
Yeah.
Was there a reason for that? Did she experience anything or see anything that made her want to be a mechanic that you could find?
She found it really interesting of just like tinkering with things. And she liked the idea of building and solving problems.
Yeah.
And she said
I could see that.
Mainly the issue was with her mother. Her mother said that if Sandra became a mechanic, she believed that it would literally bring shame to their household. And that job was for men and not for girls. Her mother would even, she would beat her if she found her tinkering around with the car engine of their family car or other engine parts that she'd find and kind of play with.
Oh, no.
Her father also didn't like the idea, but for different reasons. He feared what his daughter would be exposed to. He thought she'd be singled out, that she would struggle to find work, and that she would be targeted by other men because she was a woman.
Well, those are probably pretty realistic based on how her mom reacted.
Yeah. Sandra was really persistent, though, and she spoke really frankly with her parents, and she said that this was going to be her path, whether they liked it or not. She continued to push and rebel against them for 4 months. And I mean, 4 months of an angry 13-year-old girl, that don't sound like fun.
No, my mom lived with me, and I was angry from basically 13 to 23, so...
Yeah, my mother had to deal with that too. Her father eventually gave in after taking a trip to Manchester. He saw something that opened his eyes there. While he was there, he was at the airport and he saw 2 aviation mechanics that were working on a plane, and they were women.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so it just hit him. He was like, if they have the opportunity over here to do this, why not my daughter? Like, why is she not special? Why is she not good enough? So he knew that she wasn't going to stop pursuing this dream. So against her mother's wishes, he took her to a local mechanic's shop where he himself would work on his own car. It was like a shop that you could pull in your rig and they would provide the tools in the space, and you could like tune up your car, you could change your oil, things like that.
It kind of reminds me of like the incubator breweries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, come make your beer in our space. Pay us some money to do that.
Absolutely. And that's a good idea. I mean, shared spaces are always wonderful. There she saw her first car engine out of a car, and it was completely disabled. She said she remembers that there was like black oil running from underneath it. And she said the only way she could describe it is she fell in love with that black oil.
Oh, interesting.
So while watching this interview of her describing how she said she fell in love with the black oil, just like the look in her face, like her face lit up, almost like she was excited to like have the answers to a puzzle that nobody else has. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense of the look on her face. It was just like she truly enjoys it.
Yeah, I can imagine if you're finally able to do the thing you think you've wanted to do your whole life.
You'd be pretty stoked.
Yeah.
She continued to apprentice at that shop for 6 years. She spent most of her teenage years dismantling engines, refitting tire rods and ball joints, replacing tires, and fixing steering wheels. So even though it was taboo for a woman to be interested in this field, surprisingly, the men at the shop saw her enthusiasm and encouraged her.
Wow. That's unexpected.
Very. Sandra said, "They love me for it. I was like a little sister. I could walk to the shop barefoot and I'd be there. It was about 5 minutes away from my school." And P.S. after she said that, she said she does not recommend going barefoot in a garage because that's very unsafe.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine that would be terribly safe.
Yeah.
Like, there's lots of chemicals and sharp things.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
She would attend class all day, and then with her overalls in her bag, she would go to the shop and she would work on projects all night. And she's doing this throughout her high school years. So as she's 14, 15, 16, she graduates high school. She applies and is accepted to Benin Technical College to advance her technical skills. There, she wasn't received as well as she was with the garage where she had been apprenticing for the past 6 years. The men there did not like her. They asked her if she needed to see a doctor. Was she crazy? Or are you just lost?
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not surprising, but it's shitty nonetheless.
Yeah. She didn't let it bother her. From there, she moved on. She graduated from Auchi Polytechnic with a degree in mechanical engineering. After college, she got a job with Bendel Transport Service in Benin City in a garage where she worked with their public transportation fleets. So she's working on the entire fleets of the buses for the public transit.
That's a big deal.
Yes. And it also included 504 station wagons that needed to be tuned up, which also served as kind of like a taxi. But it's a station wagon.
I have all of these images of people getting in the back and facing out the back window.
So after this job, she moves on to the Nigerian Railway Corporation in 1991. She works for them for several years, but she kind of started feeling an itch to do something drastic. She wanted to be her own boss, and she wanted to own her own garage. So shortly after leaving the Nigerian Railway, she built and opened up her own auto garage called Sandex Car Care in 1995. So this opening of the shop led Sandra to being Nigeria's first professional female mechanic and garage shop owner-operator.
That's really cool.
There was a lot of talk about, people were talking about this lady mechanic, is what they called her. But most people talked about what good work she did. She said that she pushed herself to do better work and do a better job than anybody else because she knew that there were people out there that were taking for granted that they were just a mechanic and that was their job. And other people would doubt her, so she had to put out some of the best work.
Yeah, right? You have to be twice as good to be considered half as good.
Exactly. She ended up landing some pretty high-profile clients. She landed a contract to manage repairs for a local fleet of trucks for a local business, which had a huge distribution network. So, like, word was getting out that she was this mechanic that was taking care of these fleets, which is, word of mouth is one of the best things for business.
Oh, for sure. Especially a business like that. Like, how many times have you been like, I need a good mechanic? You're not going to go on the internet and look for a good mechanic because you can inflate reviews online.
Yeah.
But you can ask your friends and get an honest opinion.
Mm-hmm. Like, are they easy
and
to
for
deal
me,
with?
like,
good work.
When we moved to Spokane, like, that was probably one of the toughest things for us was trying to find a mechanic to go to.
Really?
That didn't fuck us over.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens way too much.
It does. And that's why word of mouth really matters, especially in mechanics.
Mm-hmm. Her operation ran really smoothly till her shop was suddenly seized by the government.
What?
So, I know. So the land her shop was on was under the Land Use Act. This act allowed the government to seize any urban property, claim it, and use it for public purpose. So this law was created. As I read the details of it, hopefully I'm getting this right. It was created when sources of petroleum were being discovered all over Nigeria.
Oh.
So they would be like,
sense.
There's petroleum there. Sorry, your home's on it. Bye. And then they would seize your land, and then they would get the petroleum.
Yeah, we want to make a profit off your land. Sorry, see you later.
Yeah. So she was kicked off of her property. Her shop was demolished and removed.
Well, and the United States has stuff like that too, like eminent domain.
Yep.
I mean, it's bananas.
So Sandra didn't let this stop her, though. She was like, no shop, no problem. She decided to convert her car into a mobile workshop and tower. So she would offer towing services up and down the freeways of Lagos, offering on-the-spot roadside assistance and repairs.
That is so fucking smart.
Isn't that good? Like, okay, how can I keep this working? What can I use to keep my career going?
It's so smart.
So after operating like this, she was able to reestablish herself and not only open up another garage, she opened up 2 garages in Lagos. So needing a staff for these garages, Sandra began to apprentice and hire other women who wanted to learn about the business and the trade.
I love when women help women.
Yes. Sandra said she saw there was a problem in Nigeria. Women were restricted to traditional career roles, taught that their work and their skills were not as valuable as men's. Women from wealthy families had opportunities to elevate themselves, obviously because they had the opportunity, they had the money behind them to do that. And they had such a heavily classed system that the enormous amount of the population was poor, especially women, and they were not able to lift themselves out of poverty. So many of these women would result to working in the sex trade at a very young age or hustling in the streets. Many fell victim to physical abuse, to drug addiction. There were no positions for women as mechanics, plumbers, or builders, and electricians. But there was also, Sandra noticed, there's no education even offered to these women. There's nothing. It's like for me, when I was reading it was like they don't even exist.
Yeah, it's like the door, the path to the door doesn't even exist.
No, and it's made of alligators in the water.
Yeah.
So Sandra felt like she had been given an opportunity and she was ready to return the favor. So she created and founded the nonprofit organization Lady Mechanic Initiative in 2004. It started with bringing together Nigerian women who had a desire to learn about the trade, something that they could learn to help sustain themselves, provide for their families, and build up their self-esteem and their sense of independence. So I have a clip that I want to share of Sandra so you can kind of hear her voice and hear the goals that she has for these girls.
Supply from this point, move your main supply.
Skill change lives. Transforming a life from nowhere to somewhere. Transforming one girl that does not have hope before. Now she has hope. Now she's even running her own garage. Now she's an entrepreneur. Now she's taking other girls off the street. Now she has dignity as a woman. Now she's confident. Now she has a voice and a future.
She is like so passionate. I really like her.
That's what I was trying to describe. I feel like I couldn't do it justice until you saw her, but she's just got this drive and like this kind of no excuses attitude. There's a scene where she walks into the classroom and she's like, I want your homework. Make sure it's on my desk. Like she's kind of a task driver, which I like.
She's a, I don't know what the female version of a ball buster is, but also she has perfect skin, and I'm on a whole skincare kick, so
she's gorgeous.
I want to know what I want to know what her secret is.
It's the oil, Amanda. It's the car oil. Yeah. So the program she developed is a 3-year training program. Sandra designed it and she teaches it herself. Many of the women that Sandra is training are women who were extremely impoverished, a lot of women who have escaped prostitution and human trafficking, recovering addicts, orphans, deportees, widows, mothers, and survivors of domestic abuse. And they're all in search of a career to support themselves and not have to be a dependent on somebody else.
That's amazing.
So Sandra has promoted the program internationally, and she has raised funds from donors and sponsors to make sure that the schooling and materials are completely free for all the women.
She's incredible.
Yeah,
that is a really, really incredible thing to do.
She actually got a grant from the MacArthur Foundation for $340,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
From the the MacArthur Foundation?
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
That is a really big fucking deal. So since the program began, it has grown into 5 different branches spreading throughout 5 states in Nigeria. Thousands of women have been trained and moved on to become certified mechanics. Some graduates have even been able to open up their own garages and are now apprenticing and teaching other women the mechanics trade.
That's how I love those. That's how like the cycle goes, right? Like you get an opportunity and you give someone else an opportunity. Like that really great animated GIF of the like women holding up another woman, pushing her up, and then another one and another one. I love that.
It's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah. And it's the only way that lasting change can be made.
Mm-hmm. Sandra created another program. It's the Lady Mechanic After School Club. Just like she needed a place to go when she was a young girl, she started a club to engage secondary school girls who have interest in mechanics and engineering. It's a safe place for them to go after school where they offer encouragement and teach them empowerment. And Sandra says she has a clear message for them, and it's a new idea. It is that you have respect, you have value, and you can be a success. Which I love the you have value part, because so many girls are not told they have value.
Right. Especially if you are coming from a situation that a lot of them are coming from, which is sex work or drug addiction and things like that. Mm-hmm. People tell you you're worthless and that's why you do these things.
I did see like there's a couple interviews of some of the girls that are and some of the women that are in her program. And I thought, like I believe sex work is real work, but the way that these women talked about it, it was like they had no choice.
Yeah.
And they were forced into it. And one woman even said, she's like, I lost my pride, so I would just take as many drugs as possible so I could just be numb and be on the stage. And that to me is not a way of life.
Yeah, there's obviously a big difference between sex trafficking, which is where you force people into sex work that don't necessarily want to be there, versus someone who's making and having their own agency and making their choices for themselves. And that's why I think personally, I've always believed that we should stop being Puritans about sex work and trying to make it illegal and arresting people for doing it. Instead, we should have it be legalized and then have unions and regulations and
so people will
rules
stop
in place
being abused and taken advantage of.
But yeah, it makes it a lot easier to bust somebody.
Yeah.
Now, like there is no such thing as a 14-year-old sex worker.
No.
That is a rape victim. But we have this notion that anybody who ends up in the sex worker trade is somehow implicit in it as well. And that's because we don't have any kind of forward thinking when it comes to laws and regulations regarding sex work, which again has always existed and it always will. You can have your personal religious beliefs and think that it's terrible. That's fine. But it will still exist regardless of what you believe.
Exactly. It's not going away. It never has for hundreds of years.
hundreds. We're talking
Thousands.
thousands and thousands of years. It has literally never not existed.
So where I was getting those clips from the video, in 2015, she was the subject of a film called Sandra Aguebor, The Lady Mechanic. The film actually went to the New York Film Festival and ended up winning a couple of awards, which I thought was very
that's cool.
She was awarded and given a National Merit Award by the federal government of Nigeria for the work that she's done. She was presented with the Inspirational Woman of the Year Award by Dalapso Osinbajo and Governor, I'm going to murder this, I'm going to try my best, Akinwunmi Ombod. Sandra has been working on cars for over 30 years, and she has run a garage for over 20. Her latest goal that she has set for herself is she wants to move from not just fixing cars, but she wants to do full-on assembly. She wants to make cars. Sandra continues to operate and run her garages and the Lady Mechanic Initiative as well. Also, this all while being a wife, and she is also a mother of 6 children.
6?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Her husband was describing watching her work, and it was like she's taking all these phone calls, she's grading papers, she's holding her 2-year-old son, and she's making sure that everything's getting taken care of. It's like this woman is just a force to be reckoned with. She's doing it all.
What the fuck is he doing?
I don't know. He seemed very nice. He seemed very
She sounds like Superwoman.
Yeah, she does. I think he was very soft-spoken, so I was like, you're a little scared of her, aren't you? So I got all of my information from Face to Face Africa, connectnigeria.com, Al Jazeera, Philanthropy Forum. NPR wrote a wonderful article, this journalist named Ofiba, and it's called Lady Mechanic Initiative Trains Women for Best Job. And the YouTube video I've been referring to was made by Al Jazeera, and it's called My Nigeria, Sandra Aguebor, Lady Mechanic.
Thank you. It was very great. I didn't know anything about her. And
I think I know
what the reporter from NPR is because I listen to a lot of NPR.
Yeah.
And I think it's Fabia Quisarkton.
I couldn't say her last name. That's why I was afraid I was going to butcher it. Yeah.
It's something.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
I hear her say her own name. That's the only reason I know how to say it.
Yeah. I was going to feel bad not being able to say her last name, but there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. That was great. I you know what's funny is that we have kind of two very complimentary people today.
Did we do it again? Are we on the same
did.
wave? Alrighty.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Jerrie Mock?
No. I don't know her.
She was the first woman to fly solo around the world.
Oh, okay. I love me some planes.
Yeah. That's why I like when you got to the part about her dad seeing female plane mechanics. I was like, yes.
Ooh.
So Jerrie Mock was actually born Geraldine Lois Fredericks on November 22nd, 1925 in Newark, Ohio, to Timothy and Blanche Friedrichs. Her grandparents had actually emigrated to the U.S. from Germany, and her mother was distantly related to the Wright brothers.
Really?
Yeah, first people in flight. So
yeah.
Maybe it was her destiny. When she was 7 years old, her father took her to an airfield and she was able to ride in the cockpit of a Ford tri-motor airplane. The ride was only about 15 minutes long, but in that little short amount of time, Jerrie discovered what she wanted to be, a pilot. And of course, as a child, Amelia Earhart was her idol.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
And Amelia was at the time flying all the time, and she was in magazines and there was photos of her everywhere. She was always on the radio and on the news. And Jerrie would collect memorabilia of Amelia Earhart, like her journeys, her photos and stuff like that. And at school, Jerrie was learning about geography, and she became very fascinated about other places in the world, especially places that have like camels and elephants. And she was like, I want to be a pilot and I want to fly all over the world so I can get to see everything.
Oh.
When she was 11, she was rushing home every day after school to hear the reports of Amelia Earhart's progress on her quest to fly solo around the world. And of course, we all know that she did not succeed at that. That in fact, Earhart disappeared. And then this 11-year-old girl's hero is lost. And so she was following all of the news reports on their search to find her, which obviously they never did.
Yeah.
And Earhart did not succeed in flying around the world. And unbeknownst to Jerrie, no other woman would follow in her footsteps for almost 3 more decades.
Jeez.
So Jerrie was a tomboy. And she was interested in what were considered at the time boy things. And she said this about the time in her life. I did not conform to what girls did, she said later. What the girls did was boring. I think that's unfair to girls, but also I think I understand what she's saying.
Yes.
You know, they're like not allowed to pursue certain kinds of things, have to be like pretty all the time. So in high school, she actually took an engineering course and was the only girl in the class, of course. And she was always like teased and people would assume she didn't really belong there. But she actually did pretty well in the class and ended up enrolling to go to college in 1943 at Ohio State University. And her major was aeronautical engineering.
Wow.
Right? And she was obviously the only woman again, because this is 1943.
Yeah.
It's an unlikely path for a woman. And the men were like, what are you even doing here? I think you're in the wrong class.
Oh, this is exactly what Sandra had to go through.
Right?
Yeah.
But they shut their mouths when she was the only one to get a perfect score on their chemistry exam.
Suck it.
However talented and driven she was, Jerrie was still subjected to the societal pressures for young women in the 1940s. She actually dropped out of college at age 20 to marry Russell Mock because that was what was expected.
Yeah.
He was a boy that she'd known since high school and they went to college together at Ohio State. Within like 2 or 3 years of marrying, they ended up having 2 boys, Roger and Gary. And Russ and Jerrie got along really well, at least for most of their marriage. They had a lot in common, and one of the things they both really enjoyed, something that my wife and I enjoy a lot, is cooking and eating all kinds of like different food and exploring tastes and stuff like that. And they were like into classical music. You could just imagine them being like these like bougie people. And but Jerrie had not given up the dream of one day flying. So in 1956, she began taking flying lessons and earned her private pilot license in 1958 alongside her husband. So they went to the classes together.
That's really cool that they did that together. Yeah.
Jerrie had another child in 1960, which is quite a bit after her other kids.
Yeah.
And this time she had a daughter named Valerie. I'm wondering if maybe Valerie was a little bit of an oopsie.
Maybe.
Because the boys were in their teens when Valerie was just a toddler.
Oh, that sounds like a oops.
Yeah, can you imagine? Like,
or maybe like, I didn't think we still could have kids. And
yeah, it definitely seems like maybe that wasn't planned. Because she had her first kid, I think, in 1945.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's a 15-year age difference. In their professional lives, Russ worked as an advertising executive and Jerrie was producing radio programs and working on a local television show. They also would often host foreign exchange students in their house because of their interest in geography and travel and food. And this was a great opportunity for Jerrie. She loved having these students from other places in the world come visit, and she would like learn about their food and learn how to do their recipes and stuff like that. And in fact, she had a couple of students who came and stayed with them that convinced her to read the Quran.
Ooh.
And I'm just like blown away that this woman in 1960, this housewife in 1960 was like sitting down reading the Quran. And it's around this time that the couple decides to invest in a plane. So they go 50-50 with some friends and they buy a 4-seat Cessna 180. And the couples would fly places on the weekends and they would take turns. And even Jerrie and her husband would take turns being the pilot. So one weekend it would be her, the next weekend it would be him, and so on and so forth.
These guys sound fun.
I know, I agree. I was like, these guys sound like a real fun couple. I mean, I can't imagine being a teenager and be like, yeah, my parents are flying to, Honolulu this weekend. On one trip to Canada, they had chartered a plane to the French island of St. Pierre. And next to the hotel dining room that they were in was the radio room. And Jerrie listened to the chatter of pilots as they were crossing the Atlantic Ocean. So I thought, well, I've got to fly the ocean. And then I thought, I might as well go all the way around. She told the Smithsonian in 2014. When Jerrie returned to their home in Bexby, she couldn't stop the nagging feeling in her. Like, hearing that radio chatter of all of these pilots flying over the ocean and everything they had to say was like really, really stuck with her. Mm-hmm. And it was just gnawing at her. So during dinner one night, she told her husband that she was bored and that she was bored of their house, of their home, like being home all day, of being a wife and a mom. She's fucking bored.
Oh gosh, I bet that kind of probably had to hurt a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, he gets to explore his life and she doesn't get to do that.
Doesn't. Yeah, she's honest.
And this is what he said. Maybe you should get in your plane and just fly around the world.
Okay.
She said, all right, I will. And what was an offhand remark, maybe even a joke, it turned serious real fast. Jerrie wrote to the National Aeronautic Association to get information about what this kind of trip would take. And she learned at the time that no other woman had actually achieved it. That Amelia Earhart didn't, and no other woman had.
And they hadn't even tried either, huh?
I don't know if there had been attempts, but according to the NAA, basically not.
Wow.
So knowing that there were probably other female pilots, remember, she's in Ohio. That's where the Wright brothers were. That's like where the birth of flight was. Mm-hmm. So they're in Ohio. She knows that if there are other female pilots that hear that she's interested in doing this and that the record has never been set, she was like, I don't want those bitches getting my spot.
Good.
So she was like,
play your cards close to the vest. Yes.
Everybody shh. And it took her 15 months to prepare for the trip.
Dang, that's a long time.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about what would go into it, but of course you would have to have a lot of planning. She said that she had to meet with the Air Force, who would help her chart her path, and she put down 19 stops on the route. And Jerrie said that some Air Force bases were strictly no-nos. Quote, certain countries didn't want me. That took time, the cablegrams going back and forth. I went to embassies all around Washington. I wrote letters and did a lot of research. That was the hardest part. The flying was easy. But yeah, of course they would have to have she ended up in Algeria and Morocco and Saudi Arabia. She was in a lot of places that I'm sure there needed to be some kind of finagling in order to get her permission to land.
Yeah, to land.
Jerrie also was flying this Cessna that they had, this pretty small plane. It was a 4-seater, and it needed to get modifications in order to make this journey. The plane was already 11 years old, which is...
That's pretty fucking old.
Yeah, I mean, that means it was built in the early 50s or whatever, mid 50s.
Yeah.
And they took out the 3 passenger seats, all of them, and they replaced them with 2 ferry tanks, which meant that she had 180 gallons of fuel on board.
Wow.
And that would allow her to fly the plane for up to 24 hours and 2,400 nautical miles. They also upgraded the engine and installed twin radio direction finders, dual short-range radios, a long-range radio, and a new compass.
That's what I was kind of wondering. I was like, the mechanics of that plane, if it's 11 years old.
Yeah, we're going to get to some of the stuff that didn't get replaced that needed to be.
Okay.
So just a few months before she was set to take off, the NAAA called her and told her that another woman, Joan Miriam Smith, was also planning a solo trip around the world at basically the exact same time.
Oh, jeez.
Effectively making it a race for the record. And Joan was actually a much more experienced pilot. Like, she was really well respected in, like, aviation circles. She was well known. She had, like, thousands of hours of flying. Jerrie had 700. Like,
oh, jeez.
It was, and she was flying a faster, brand new plane.
Oh, jeez.
So it was like Jerrie was definitely the underdog in this. And for his part, Russ, her husband, he was securing sponsorships and got one from the Columbus Dispatch, which was an Ohio newspaper. And the Dispatch gave them $10,000 toward the flight, which I read in an article was about $75,000 in 2014.
Wow.
So it's a considerable amount of money.
Yeah, decent.
Russ was really all about the spotlight, though, and he wanted people to really spotlight Jerrie, and she was pretty introverted and didn't want the attention. She was really about fulfilling her dream, especially her childhood fantasies of being able to see the world and, like, ride a camel and try great global cuisine. Like, that's what her dream was. It's like flying solo, exploring the world.
Having an
Not
adventure.
like, yeah, exactly. She wasn't like, I want all the newspapers to follow me and love me. Like, she didn't care about that. But the pressure of having this other woman also making this trip at the same time meant that Jerrie ended up pushing her departure date up by 2 weeks and rushing their repairs and things like that they were doing on the plane. And Russ told Jerrie that there was a chance that if she didn't get out on the air soon enough so that she could have a chance to win, quote unquote, that they would lose the sponsorship and therefore the trip would be off.
Oh, jeez.
Because she wouldn't have been able to afford all of the fuel and everything it takes to do this. So on March 19th, 1964, Jerrie Mock set out on her trip around the world 2 days after Joan Smith headed out. Right out of the gate, it was not a good flight. Jerrie encountered terrible conditions over the ocean and nearly died as she was trying to go over the Bermuda Triangle, which is, of course, what happened to Amelia.
Yeah.
Right? She disappeared. And what was wild about it is that, like, when she was at the airfield to take off from Ohio, there were lots of people there, like, cheering her on, and there was news cameras and things like that. So it was very busy. And there was an air traffic control tower that gave her all of her directions via a huge outdoor speaker, because then everybody could hear it, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't until she'd taken off and was in the air and started to have trouble that she realized that her radio wasn't working at all.
Shit.
She had zero radio help and was, like, trying to navigate through a storm. She can't see below her because of the storm clouds. So she's trying to land in this insane storm. She thought she might have to do a water landing. It was bad. And then as she's going to land, then she realizes the landing itself, she's finally made it to Bermuda. She's like, I'm going to live. It's going to be great. Is trying to land, and her brakes, which were supposed to have been replaced, had not been. And she ended up having to stand straight up in order to have enough pressure on the brake to make her stop.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it turned out that was a Russ decision. He had told the mechanics to skip the new brakes because they didn't have time.
All right, Russ, you're not so cool anymore.
And looking back years later, Jerrie believes that her radio was intentionally sabotaged.
Ooh.
Because when the mechanics in Bermuda went in to try to figure out what was wrong with her radio, they discovered that the ends that should have been connecting into the radio were completely disconnected and had been taped.
Oh, that's so on purpose. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she felt like it was somebody who must have wanted Joan Miriam Smith to win the race.
Mm-hmm. God, they're like willing to kill her?
Yeah, I guess. Isn't that crazy?
Jeez, that is crazy.
So the repairs that were needed in order to allow her flight to continue actually delayed her by almost an entire week. It was like 6 days. So this pushed Russ to push her to fly faster and longer every day. He was like, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta be in the air. And he was pressuring her to try to stay ahead of Joan Miriam Smith. Now, Joan was on a different flight path. And technically, even if she had beat her to the punch, like had finished the route, she still wouldn't have technically been the first person, because in order for it to be like the record or something, they have to have officials, and you have to go through the NAAA and have people like set up to do this. And that's what Jerrie had done.
Okay.
So, but in the eyes of people, it would have been whoever finished it first. They wouldn't have cared if their official records were whatever. So Russ is like, you've got to beat her. You've got to beat her. And after days of him pestering and pushing her, she finally broke, and she told him over the phone this with regards to Joan Miriam Smith. She can be all the way home for all I care. If you call me again to talk about Joan, I'll come home on an airliner.
So shut up, Russ.
However, as feisty as she was, his pressure campaign worked. Jerrie had set out for this trip to be a sightseeing adventure, but most of the places that she went to, she arrived in the dark, slept in a hotel for about 5 hours, and then was up in the air again the next day.
Mm.
Unless her plane needed repairs, she never got to go into the cities and explore anything.
That's a bummer.
It really is. However, there were a few notable experiences she had. One was when she landed at what she thought was the Cairo airport in Egypt, but it was, in fact, a secret military base designed to look like the Cairo airport.
Okay.
And when she got there, they were like, guns out, like, who the hell are you? And she was detained and ended up spending the day at the palace of the exiled King Farouk. And so she was in Egypt, and they were like, they had her detained, and they were going through everything and making sure she was legit and like not a spy.
Yeah.
And while she was there, she got to hang out with this king, but also she got to ride a camel.
Oh, yay. That was the one thing that she really, really, really wanted to do.
Jerrie also landed in Saudi Arabia, and she told this really great story about how when she like landed, everybody's just like staring, and they're like watching her get out of the plane, and everybody's just watching her, and it's very weird. And she gets out, and she's wearing a skirt and heels, and they just erupt in shouts and screams, and they're clapping and so excited because this was just wild to them to see a woman come out of this plane alone. And they made this, a couple of the writers and stuff pointed out that, after all, women weren't allowed to drive vehicles, let alone planes in Saudi Arabia at the time.
Yeah.
And in fact, they weren't allowed to drive cars until 2014, 15?
Oh, jeez.
But she also had some real near misses with her life, with danger. There were obviously those tumultuous storms on the ocean that happened 2 times to her. And while she was flying over Libya, over the continent of Africa, one of her antennas started smoking, and it was right next to a tank of gasoline.
Ah!
So, but she was super quick thinking, very sharp and cool as a cucumber. And every time there was something like this that happened, she was able to just fix it and then not have it happen. She had an almost emergency water landing, was able to pull out of that. almost had an engine catch on fire. She came out of that. She was impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty cool-headed.
And that's pretty impressive given how inexperienced she was. She really wasn't a very experienced pilot. You know, they'd just been doing like weekend trips, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And she actually even flew over Vietnam. And this is in the heart of the Vietnam War. And she said that, quote, somewhere not far away, a war was being fought, but from the sky above, all looked peaceful.
Nice.
So Jerrie made her way back to Columbus, Ohio, and landed on April 17th, 1964. And there was a crowd of 5,000 people cheering for her when she landed. And in that crowd of people was also her family. She had flown around the world in just 29 days and had, in fact, secured the record for the first woman to fly solo around the world.
That is awesome.
Yeah. The attention for Jerrie was not something she really liked. She didn't know what to say to people, to the reporters and stuff. This is what she said about herself. The kind of person who can sit in an airplane alone is not the type of person who likes to be continually with other people.
True. Very true.
Unfortunately, she would continue to be bombarded. Within the coming weeks after her arrival back in Ohio, she was on the Today Show and was given a medal by President Lyndon B. Johnson. And the calls kept coming, and Jerrie kept going on these like appearances that she had to make. And it turns out that the sponsorship from the Columbus Dispatch was actually required to be paid back.
What?
So she had to do these appearances so that she could get paid, so she could pay back this newspaper.
Probably something that Russ didn't disclose to her when he got this money, I'm imagining.
I'm guessing not. And in fact, Russ saw this as an opportunity to make money and to capitalize on her fame. He was like envisioning her being like Amelia Earhart and being in newspapers and on television and doing all of this stuff all of the time and being famous forever. Mm-hmm. But Jerrie was like not into it. Yeah. She didn't want any of that. And she like retreated from the spotlight. And soon enough, she was completely forgotten.
Wow.
After her flight around the world, Jerrie had competed in some air races and she set a few speed records, which is pretty cool. And she was gifted a new plane, a Cessna 206. But in 1969, the IRS came knocking. And they said, I know, fucking IRS, man. They said she owed $6,000 for the plane that she owed to the IRS.
But it was a gift.
Yeah, that's what she said. She was like, but it was a gift. They gave it to me. Why would I owe $6,000 on this fucking plane?
Yeah.
And she couldn't afford it. Like, there was just no way. So she hired a lawyer who was able to successfully dispute the charge, but then she owed the lawyer $6,000.
Of course.
And Jerrie couldn't afford to fly anymore, so she sold the plane, paid off her bills, and then that was that. She never again could afford to fly.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
I know. It was like her fucking dream. The year after she sold her plane, Jerrie wrote a book about her experiences flying around the world, which she called 38 Charlie, which was on her plane, the 38C. The book wasn't like a huge bestseller. They only printed 1,000 copies. And Jerrie ended up moving to Florida, where she used what money she had left to buy a little home there. And of course, Russ, good old Russ, he met another woman. He had an affair. Met another woman. She had not such great things to say about him. About this, she said that he met a woman who'd just gotten an inheritance, and that the reason why she left, that he left her, was so that he could fly around the world with this. He could finally go to Morocco and stuff like that with her.
Ooh,
yeah, it was not great.
Yeah.
But they divorced in 1979, but I think this is really weird because they still sometimes spent time together. Like he would come over on the weekends and like they would cook together and stuff.
Where was it for the kids? Was it to see his daughter and his sons, or
no? They were like adults by then.
Oh.
Her daughter was 19 when they divorced.
Oh, maybe they were just maintaining a friendship.
Yeah, it was real weird. Like her daughter thinks that they would have eventually gotten back together, but unfortunately, Russ died of a heart attack in 1991.
Oh,
and less than 6 months after that, their son Gary died from cirrhosis at only age 42.
Oh, was he an alcoholic?
I guess he must have been. And then Roger, their other son, died in 2007 from complications of diabetes.
Jeez.
So the only child she had left after that was her daughter Valerie.
Mm-hmm.
Jerrie Mock's story and achievements fell completely off the radar. In fact, when her name was put on a list of potential National Aviation Hall of Fame inductees in 2003, no one on the committee even knew who she was.
Oh, wow.
By the way, the National Aviation Hall of Fame is in Ohio.
Oh, no.
Where she's from. As the 50th anniversary of her achievement neared, a man from Ohio who had known who she was, his name was Bill Kelly. He had known about her since he was like a kid. He was like 85 years old. He'd known about her this whole time. He wanted to honor her, and he felt like she needed to be recognized. So he offered to mortgage his own house to pay for a statue to honor her,
wow.
saying that any place that mentions Amelia Earhart, she should be there.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
Very, yeah.
Jerry's sister then joined the cause, and Jerry's sister and this guy, Bill Kelly, they ended up raising $48,000 for a bronze statue to be erected at a Newark, Ohio museum. Which is pretty cool.
That is very cool.
So they were going to have this big statue dedication in September of 2013, and they really wanted Jerry to come, but she didn't want to. She had kind of become a recluse. And I read this really great piece in BuzzFeed by a journalist named Amy Saunders, who also talked about that she had gotten like some kind of wound or something on the side of her temple that had like, she'd refused to get treated, and it had like grown, and she was like basically embarrassed to be seen in public.
Oh my gosh.
So she was even offered a private plane to take her directly to the ceremony, but she declined. And instead, she watched the ceremony on a laptop with her grandchildren.
Oh, wow. She is very recluse.
Jerrie Mock died on September 30th, 2014, in her home in Quincy, Florida. While Jerrie may not have had the fame and fortune of someone like Amelia Earhart, she still pushed boundaries and set new goals for women in aviation. Her daughter Valerie told the New York Times that Jerrie, quote, didn't do what she did for fame or fortune. She liked the idea of what was going on in other parts of the world, and she wanted to see it for herself.
Mm.
So even though Jerrie didn't get to explore the way she wanted to when she was on her trip, the journey was still pretty magical for Jerrie. In that, I told you that I had read that great article on BuzzFeed. So this is the way Amy Saunders described when she had interviewed Jerrie about this trip. This is how she described some of the stuff that Jerrie witnessed. She had experienced indescribable peace, the beauty of clouds glowing gold at sunrise. As she crossed the Atlantic one night, the starry sky perfectly clear, she actually pinched herself to see if she was dreaming.
Oh.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Image, that peaceful image of her enjoying that solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that concludes the story of the first woman to fly solo around the world, Jerrie Mock.
That is awesome. We had some amazing firsts today.
Yeah. And some women who did things that were unexpected and
And told
kind
they
of
were
show
not
the world.
supposed to do it.
Jerrie kept being referred to in the press as the housewife.
Oh my gosh.
So
that was one thing Sandra said, is that they called her the lady mechanic. And she's like, why can't I just be a mechanic?
well, and like that Joan Miriam Smith, nobody called her like the housewife trying to fly around the world. She was just a pilot. She just happened to be a female pilot. But Jerrie Mock wasn't seen that way because her flying was like vanity flying or whatever. But she showed them all up. So there's that.
There's that.
So I want to tell you about this great BuzzFeed article. I highly recommend it just as a read. It was so well written, and I just really adored the way this was written. So it was called How an Ohio Housewife Flew Around the World, Made History, and Was Then Forgotten by Amy Saunders on BuzzFeed. There was a great New York Times obit. I used The Flying Housewife for the FAA, My Grandmother, the Aviatrix. I love that word. And that was actually written by her granddaughter, Rita Juanita Pike, for
That's
CNN.
a nice name.
I know, Rita Juanita. That's great.
I feel she should be like on like a reporting from over in the corner. This is Rita Juanita for Channel 9.
And then Where Amelia Earhart Tried, Geraldine Mock Succeeded, which was an interview, again by Amy Saunders. And I didn't even realize that until after I was writing my bibliography. And I was like, oh, this is also Amy Saunders.
Oh, cool.
For Air and Space magazine. And then I also used a little Wikipedia, although they didn't have much on her.
Awesome. This was a great one. I love these ladies.
I do too. They're pretty adventurous, no nonsense women.
Yeah. Who didn't listen to anybody else?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, I am so glad we are continuing to do this despite a pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody.
And make sure that you're staying safe and hopefully wearing masks.
Yeah.
And thank you to Lucas McIntyre, our editor.
Thank you, Lucas. I'm pretty sure I just bumped my mic again, so sorry.
Sorry, Lucas. And we need to thank Jennifer Finch of L7 for our lovely theme music.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening. Till next time.
Goodbye. All right, we ready?
We're ready. As I bump my mic one last fucking time. Jesus Christ.
That was pretty great. I loved watching that happen.
Okay.